to order. It's Thursday, October 22nd, and it's 1:07. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law 38, Chapter 20, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Harwich Affordable Housing Trust is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided in the order. Okay, so I'm going to take a poll to make sure that we're all here. So, Larry?
Present.
Brendan? Okay, not currently here. Joe?
Present.
And Judith?
Present.
Okay, so we have a quorum. We're going to proceed with the agenda. First up on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. I want to take them separately because the first thing is on the June 29th, 2020 minutes, it notes that there was an approach made by Charlene to the acting town administrator, who was Joe Powers. It incorrectly specifies Bob Lawton, so we either have to change the name, and I don't think that she approached you, Joe, did she?
I do not recall.
About contracts? Okay. So my guess is that she approached Bob as the acting assistant town administrator. Does that sound about right? Or do you want me to table the minutes until we can?
If it's okay to table, I'd just like to circle back with Bob and confirm.
Okay. Because I want these, everybody knows I want the minutes to be accurate. That's me. So we're really working on the July 23rd, 2020 minutes.
I would move, Mr. Chairman, that the July 23rd minutes be approved and published.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Judith seconds it. All right. So on these remote meetings, we have to poll. Larry?
In favor, aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Judith?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so it's 4-0-1. Next item on the agenda is a presentation by Chris Wise.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Brendan is here now, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Okay, so noted. He arrived at 1:10. Hi, Brendan. We've passed the minutes already, Brendan. You're not only muted, it sounds like you've got earmuffs on. Can you hear us? All right. What does he have to press to come off of mute if he wants to?
That's up to him.
No, on the
Brendan.
phone.
On the phone, it's *6.
On the phone, it would be *6. On your computer screen, it would be all the way to the bottom, black. But all right, Joe, you asked to be recognized?
If we've now proceeded to item B on the agenda, Mr. Chairman, I would like to make some comments if I could.
Sure. I mean, as to the merits of the presentation, or?
Yeah, I want to advise you and the remainder of the trust of information I've received, but also as it relates to ongoing procedures related to potential 40B projects. I think to use the metaphor of the cart before the horse, in this case, I would say that the presentation comes before the application. And I think we ought not to do that. And I can elaborate on that, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like me to or allow me to.
Yeah, can you please explain that?
Sure. So it's my understanding, and I know Art could fill in the blanks, but that Mr. Wise presented to the Housing Committee on September 14th and had submitted documents which constitute the packet that we have today for the board, for the trust's discussion on the quote Chris Wise project. Within that, you'll notice that there's what I would refer to as an orphan document. It's a single page that's indicated by the number 7. And on that, you'll see, and it's the first page, I believe, in the packet. And that talks about, it says section 3, project information. name of proposed project, the East End. Well, Mr. Chairman, as you know, from me and my background, parliamentary procedure dictates that incomplete materials should not be included for discussion. So it begs the question, what were the preceding 6 pages? What I've discovered is that page 7 is actually the page 7 of a 16-page document known as a project eligibility letter. And not to go too far afield, but the project eligibility letter is an application that an applicant, in this case potentially Mr. Wise, would file with a subsidizing agency. In this case, the subsidizing agency is the Mass Housing Partnership. Now, this is significant because I know there's been a lot of anxiety in our community about the, quote, 40B project. I think it's accurate to say that there is no present 40B project before the town, and certainly not the one that is represented for East Harwich. If there were a 40B project, it would have manifested itself as Mr. Wise filling out the PEL, the project eligibility letter, submitting that concurrently to the subsidizing agency, Mass Housing Partnership, which would then automatically trigger the Board of Selectmen as the chief executive branch of the town to conduct what the selectmen have already said they want to do. And that is a hearing for public input on the proposed project. So the materials that we have in our packet are incomplete. The materials that were presented to the Housing Committee are incomplete. And the materials that were going to be presented to the Board of Selectmen on Monday evening, October 26th, are incomplete. And so I know there's anxiety and a willingness to talk about the project, but it's not properly before the town. And I think we do a disservice, and Mr. Wise. Yep.
Can everybody go back to muted except for Joe? Okay, I think it was Brendan. So go on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, not to belabor everything, but there is no 40B project presently before the town of Harwich. And that's significant because there's, as we all know, the Board of Selectmen, and I believe this trust has received numerous documents and petitions, rightfully so, because there's an assumption that there is a 40B project before the town. There is not a 40B project before the town, nor is there a project that has been formalized with Mass Housing Partnership. And I took the liberty today of confirming that with the acting director for community assistance, Laura Schufelt at MHP, that while there have been conversations, there is no project. And I think that is legitimately causing anxiety where there shouldn't be any. If Mr. Wise wants to come before the town in any of its committees, boards, or trusts, I think we should do so in accordance with the processes required under 40B. And as such, there is no such project. And by including page 7 of 16, there's ample information that should have been provided on the full document that would allow everybody in a transparent manner to be mindful of what is being requested. It strikes me that we're shopping around conversations when what we ought to be doing as the town is working through the legal process so that Mr. Wise is not denied of his rights, that the town is not led into a prejudicial environment, and that the public has a right to respond to an action that is before the town, which presently there are none.
And where would that, let's say the application got completed and submitted to MHP, where would that start in the town?
So what would happen is concurrent with the application to Mass Housing Partnership, is the applicant is then required to, at the same time, notify the chief executive agency of the town, known as the Board of Selectmen in this case, that there is a project eligibility letter pending and that the board must conduct its review within 30 days of receipt of that letter. So as you and I know, Mr. Chairman, there's considerable anxiety from the general public that they want to make sure that they haven't lost their voice. And my statement is not only has no one lost their voice, there's nothing to argue about yet. And so once that application is filed and the Board of Selectmen have been notified, then we would get into the necessary discussion with the general public and any other parties as to the project eligibility letter and the overall project as presented. As such, presently, there is no such project.
Okay. Chris Wise, do you have any comments?
Sure. Is my mic off?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
So, thank you, Chris Wise, for the record. This is not the first project that I've done similar in people's interests. What I've always done, and even what Mass Housing Partnership application applies and implies, is have you gotten feedback from the community, the town, the trusts, and others? Do you have their support? So the effort that I started back a year plus ago, meeting with the Housing Trust and meeting with the Planning Board and all the various agencies, was to show the project along the way. When this information was supplied a couple of 3 weeks ago, it was noted incomplete. It is in process, very close to complete, but seeking the feedback from the community and the boards while still molding and modeling it. So I will be more than happy to withdraw all of this, but this was the best intent to let people have more than enough time to look at this and not be shocked by a application coming from the state. That was my intent, and I would be more than happy to not go any further than this, but know that my intent was only to be ultra transparent and making notes to various departments that this is not complete. And so I apologize if I've created anxiety about it. I am still looking for input from various boards and departments, which I have been able to within the town hall itself with various departments, from bus services to the planning department to people, as I would do in any project where I try to get enough input from people to help mold it. So with that, I think I apologize again for creating something that I thought was actually doing the opposite of what it's created.
Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Wise. I think what's emblematic of the problems that I have presently are that I know the previous speaker will concur with the following statement. Mr. Wise and I have never met, have never communicated with one another, and have not discussed in any way, shape, or form what's going on. Now, that's problematic because of the relationship that I have with the Board of Selectmen, who will have a regulated process. And while I appreciate what Mr. Wise has made reference to, I know, Mr. Chairman, as a member of the Board of Selectmen, you've heard me say many times, we haven't always done it that way because I'm new. And whatever way you did not include me. And so I apologize for that while not making any apology for that. And I think we need to be mindful of that process. So I think there is a way to go about it. I don't think we've done that yet, but I stand ready on behalf of the trust and the Board of Selectmen, as well as the town at large, to speak with the potential applicant to see where we're at. But given the heavily regulated nature of 40B, I think the town would be wise to operate in an appropriate manner going forward. And with that, I think we lost our chairman. Here we go.
No, unfortunately for you, you have not. But yeah, I would like to make a comment. Chris, off of all of this, I went back to that July 2019 meeting that was of the trust that was chaired by Chris Clark. And there were numerous times where you had said, now this is going to be a recommendation, you can follow it or not. There were numerous times where you said you were going to reach out to the community, even if that meant knocking on doors. Given what's going on, and by the way, the latest iteration of the anti-petition for something that doesn't exist is 689 names. So I really strongly suggest that you do some community outreach before you start going into the formal process, because there are a lot of people there that are hostile over something that they didn't even know has happened. And as Joe pointed out, hasn't happened. As far as, just so everybody knows, because I'm trying to make sure that the threads are all pulled together here, there was an approved site plan for what you were legally eligible for under zoning, which was 10 lots to be developed. I'm not sure whether it was a grid, but because I haven't looked at the project, but that was submitted as a real project and approved. So you're holding that as a possibility to develop. This one, according to Joe, and I just found that out myself, is that Laura Schufelt, while being consulted, does not have an actual application, and nor does the Board of Selectmen really. So with that, I mean, there's a lot more work to be done on your part to get to the point where you can have an intelligent discussion over what it is you want to do and what it is the community feels about it. You understand that, or?
I do. You're talking to me?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I do. And however processes change and whatever is the right direction, I have been trying my hardest with all of the boards to do just that. And if we need to redirect, and Joe, prior to your entrance, back when Chris was running the show, I had at least 3 meetings with him. And then there was an interim and others. And so I would love the opportunity to sit down with you and talk about it when it's applied or not. It sounds like what I'm hearing a little bit of is, get an application into the state so that we have something concrete that we're all singing from the same sheet of music. That application is ready to go and has been ready to go, but I was under the thoughtful concept of transparency by discussing the project prior, but I will absolutely change direction and do the various community outreaches. But I think what I'll do is put the application in. My only goal in all of this is to take the temperature of people, work with communities, work with the town members at their capability of and process and new process. So with that, I hope to understand another path. And I think if what I'm hearing right now is, Joe, you would more appreciate having something concrete to talk about, like an application to Mass Housing Partnership, where then through the selectmen and the notification of Mass Housing Partnership to them, you're notified and the gates open up for review in a process that is more regulated commonly. Is that accurate, Joe?
Mr. Chairman, may I? Thank you.
Yes.
Chris, before I get to that, I just want to level set some expectations. The reference made to my predecessor who was running the show. I'm not suggesting that I'm running the show here, but what I am suggesting is that if you leverage the Office of Administration, staff and I can make sure that all appropriate boards, commissions, and committees are dialed in and that administration's aware of it on behalf of the board. But I also want to say that whether you do the application for the project eligibility letter, I don't want anyone to take from this that I'm suggesting that Mr. Wise avail himself of community input sessions. Rather, what I'm saying is the Housing Committee, the Affordable Housing Trust, the Board of Selectmen, or any other entity which is a subset of the body politic known as the town of Harwich is not necessarily the community. And I think that's where there's the anxiety for the general public. The general public is the community. They're anxious and looking forward to opportunities to speak, so that if Mr. Wise wanted to host those community input meetings on his own, the town wouldn't have any objection to that. If the applicant does apply for a project eligibility letter, the Board of Selectmen must have an event that has public input allowed. So I don't want to suggest that the town is telling Mr. Wise to file. What I'm suggesting is that were he to file, there's a regulatory process by which the board is bound. Absent that, it may be beneficial to Mr. Wise and the public if there are mutually agreed upon community events, and that's something that doesn't have to go through the town, but that I could certainly, on behalf of the town, through the Board of Selectmen, work with Mr. Wise to make sure the public is heard.
Just to unpack, there's a lot to unpack there. Just to unpack it, I understand what Chris Wise is saying, and I understand what Joe Powers is saying. So let me roll back a little bit. The guy who was running the show, I think he made that shortcut because the titles that Chris Clark was holding was the town administrator on the one hand and the chair of the trust on the other hand. So everybody knows going backwards what transpired. I concur with what Joe's saying, Chris. It's your choice whether you want to pursue the application. Once you make that choice, if you do, there's some very specific things that have to happen, and I think it would be in your best interest to make sure that those things do happen, because that's how the public is going to be able to get into this. There's a lot of other things that have to be considered. I brought up in that meeting back in July of a year ago about there being a hard cap in the amount of sewage that Chatham can take, and that there would have to be a consideration about sewage offset flows too. So there's a lot of things that would have to happen. I just want to ask one question. Do you also have a CPA application in?
You're talking to me?
Yes, Chris.
No.
Okay, so there's no ask of the Community Preservation Committee at the moment.
Nope.
Okay. Well, that's out there. I just want to make sure whether rumor was right or not. So I wanted to give you that opportunity. All right. So before I take any action to table this, there are people who have signed on. Scott?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. At this point, we just have one individual who.
Can I speak?
Elaine, there's a queue right now. You could speak after the first person who signed up for this, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Yep, and that is actually, hold on a second. I've been reached out to by that individual, and she no longer wishes to speak today. So let me just give me one moment, please, just to make sure that no one else is emailed in. They have not. So, Mr. Chairman, your desire on who to speak from the field here.
All right, then I'm going to recognize Elaine Shavlin then.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Elaine Shovlin, I just wanted to bring to your all attention, maybe you're not aware of it, but today's Cape Cod Chronicle front page has an article about the two forums being slated, and paragraph 3 of this article on the front page says that Chris Wise has stated he plans to seek a 40B permit. So this is where what the public is seeing today on the front page of the paper, just so you know.
And Elaine, I appreciate the comment, but that's precisely why Joe was recognized originally. There is no it to discuss. That article is premature because it assumes there is a project. A project doesn't exist until it conforms to state statute and it's submitted properly, which this isn't that. And Joe wanted to weigh in, so.
Thank you for allowing me to speak.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that. I would simply add, that's one of the concerns that I have. There has been ample discussion in public sphere, such as newspapers and online, which really hinders the general public's opportunity to weigh in. So rather than legislate this through newspaper articles, let's legislate it through a regulated process, or and really impose upon Mr. Wise to have a broader public opportunity for input separate from the town's bodies.
And I want to underscore that. What you're saying is that he can reach out on his own without town sponsorship to the public should he choose.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would argue that going forward that's a process that we may want to consider, that potential applicants should be ready, willing, and able to sponsor community input events to gain the community's insight long before the bodies of the town are put in that position, so that the community has several opportunities through the informal process that Mr. Wise could host, and then the more formal and regulated processes that are required. We should be looking to give the community as many opportunities to weigh in rather than have them read about it in a newspaper where they can't engage in dialogue.
Well, and my comment on that is that reading about it in the newspaper is also a stretch, because this is what happens when you get into a situation where it's not even real yet. Where you start getting gossip, where people start, giving opinions for or against based on. I remember saying this in that July meeting too. What is it? I mean, we're closer to knowing what it is because of this incomplete submission here, but we don't have an actual submission. So I can't emphasize enough that we should table this, and Chris Wise should get to you to understand, where in the town process he can go if that's what he wants to do, to advance the project. Does that sound like?
Can I say something, Mr. Chair?
Well, I think I just invited Joe to do a job task.
Oh,
I want to
sorry.
see what he thinks about it.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll try to be brief, which I'm often trying to do but never accomplish. Not to be a parliamentary procedure honk, but I would argue that the best course of action for the trust to take today is no action at all, because were you to table the matter, the notice that was given was for a proposed development on Route 137. And I would argue that the word of proposed intimates a proposal, which intimates a project. I think the appropriate course of action is for the trust to take no action whatsoever.
Okay, I hear you. Judith?
No, I just wanted to add that I think it's a good opportunity for the trust to, I'm thinking Pelinda, to come up with a presentation on what a 40B is, how they work, that sort of thing that we can maybe have on the website, on the town website for reference too, for people, which I think will be helpful for the general public. But I agree, Mr. Wise should get out there and literally knock on doors, not literally, but community outreach, because I won't say any more. Thanks.
Okay, but again, I think that's an excellent proposal, and I think, Pelinda, we need to put that in a hopper as an agenda item, because prior to us just throwing it up on the internet site, it would be nice to have a discussion at the trust, starting at the beginning, about what a 40B is, and the so-called friendly 40Bs and the so-called hostile 40Bs, and then go through the whole process so that everybody in the public understands it. I don't think the Board of Selectmen really is geared towards that kind of an explanation, even though they have a role in it.
Right.
But yeah, I think we should agenda that as a roundtable discussion, just so the public is educated, and frankly, so we are. I mean, this could have gone on if Joe hadn't, doubled back to find out whether the underpinnings of this were all there. So with that, unless anybody has any further objection, I'm not going to pursue taking a motion. I'm going to move on to the next agenda item. Is there anybody object to that?
No objection from me.
Okay. All right, so then we have a Community Preservation Act application that was in the packet.
Thank you. I'll say goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I think, and I've discussed this with Joe as the town administrator more than anything else, that the application needs to be a lot more specific, and it also requires people to vote on it, the support for it. But nonetheless, we have a deadline coming up, so we need to be able to get something in there, even if it's amended and it more fully specifies. Pelinda, you and I have had discussions about this. CPC doesn't really reward activity as much as progress, so we need to be able to quantify what the likely ask is for Sisson Road and put that in the application, because they are getting antsy, and that's something I need to pursue with Joe also, about the legitimacy of the claim that if you don't spend anything, if you don't spend money conveyed to you within 3 years, that it gets withdrawn automatically. I have my doubts that it could be done automatically, but more to the point, it took us several years to aggregate enough money to be able to do a buy down on Sisson Road, so that it actually looks like the community surrounding it. And that was an effort to do some community outreach, that it's not just the project, it's what does it look like as you pass it, and how does it fit in with a neighborhood? Because we've always discussed we don't build massive affordable housing complexes. We build things that people become members of the community within that project. It's not just them and us. And we're going to need a substantial amount of money for that kind of a buy down, as Laura Schufelt had suggested when we talked initially about the contract. And I'm not going to belabor the point, but I will also suggest that it'd be a wise idea. Well, not only a wise idea, you can't go directly to Griffin, but you can go directly to Joe Powers so that he can, because I don't dictate the labors of any of the town government. The full-time employees, it's a pyramid, and it stops with Joe. So I want to make sure that we're doing this properly, because we don't give directions directly to even Charlene, without Joe knowing what's going on as the town administrator, not as a member of the trust. You okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. But the application, we have to vote something. And if you want to change it, then that's fine. But I would suggest accepting what we've got in a package so that we could submit it legitimately, authorize the chair to sign, get it over there, and then work on perfecting it, because it'll be in under the deadline. Anybody have any comments about that? Or
I would agree with you, Mr. Chairman. The faster we can move forward on any development in town, the better.
any
I agree.
development that we do cooperatively, given our prior conversation. All right, Joe?
I think Judith was going to speak next.
Judith?
Oh, no, I just said I agree.
Mr. Chairman, my own,
To move it
Hold
to
on
a
a second.
vote.
Judith, is your camera frozen?
I
Either
think
that or
so.
you're remarkably patient and stoic.
Yeah, it's probably, I'm competing with a high schooler for
Bandwidth.
bandwidth.
Look
Yeah.
very serious. Keep that icon going. Joe?
my only question is, if we think we want it to be beyond part-time housing coordinator, as far as the application, should we put in language so that we have specificity? Meaning, I know this is a preliminary or initial application, but I think we want to be mindful as to the language we use so that the supplemental application isn't seen as changing the intent of the first.
Well, I was going to suggest that we put another purpose in there, and that simply state, in order to aggregate money to be able to buy down a project for a developer to be able to build. Because that's really what we're holding on to the money for. We're going to be cooperatively helping. A developer bidding on this, we could give them bonus points, but outside of buying down with money, what it looks like is going to be largely determined by the developer, unless we have a cache of money that we can contribute to get what we want out of it. And that typically does happen. Right now, we're not in a position to lose money, and we definitely, I might point out that the most that you could possibly devote on that CPC application legitimately, if it's just for the housing coordinator, would be about 50 grand. So that's not the ask, right? Would that be correct, Belinda?
Yes, you are correct, Mr. Cameron.
Okay, so why don't we do that, is identify the housing coordinator with a specific amount, up to 50,000, say, because we have other money if we needed to augment that, if we put it out to contract. Because a contractor is always going to ask what the funding source is. We do get flagpole money too. So I say we put a number in with the housing coordinator amount, and then say the balance of the request is to aggregate money in order to successfully negotiate with a developer to buy down the project to a type of building that we would like to see in town. And that's really what we're doing. So,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, Art.
can I inject here? I got two comments
Yeah.
coming from the Housing Committee. One, and I think you already answered it. I was going to ask, well, what is in the application? We were not part of the application process, so we don't know what's in the application. So I guess you answered that. There's only one thing in the application, and that's the salary for the housing administrator. And then the second point I'd like to point out is, and I'm beating this drum again, and I beat it before, we should have more than one project on the table. I think we can juggle more balls than just one in the air at a time. And now here we are grappling for what should we put on an application. And, you know, we shouldn't have to be grappling. We should know. We should have more than one iron in the fire at a time, whatever you want to call it. So that's
I will take that criticism directly, but I will say the main proponent of holding back has been me. Do one project that we could be successful at, that we could point to show that this is the kind of thing we're doing, mainly because, as Joe pointed out, I hate doing these things ad hoc, where we actually do something and then come up with a plan to do it second. The fact of the matter is, we are in the middle of a suspended project, and I think Belinda could agree with this, with J.M. Goldson, to create an action plan that we do not currently have. I'm insistent that the public be part of that action plan, because it's valueless unless the public feels that it's its plan. So
Don, I hear you, and I agree with you. The public should be part of it. But the bottom line is, no matter what the public says, our mission is to build affordable housing. You know, we're not going to do something outside that. I mean, maybe it's a little more specific, but the big tent we're under is to build affordable housing, and we should have another project at least on the table that we're looking at. We don't have to have, maybe we don't have to have 2 shovels in the ground at one time, but we could have at least another piece of paper that we're looking at. And I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to take up any more time.
Thank you. I get that. It depends on which we you're talking about, but the trust we have been discussing other things. If I will point out, and I think all the trust members, except perhaps Joe, will know this, we've had several asks, and it would have been really easy to spend out almost everything we got with the asks that we were presented for various things, rental assistance, buy downs and projects. And I'm not going to get into that unless we have a roadmap that shows why and how we're doing what we do, because this is fundamental to the future of the trust itself. It's like, what is our goal? What is our mission? How are we going to accomplish it? And what priorities do we set in order to advance that? So we had given a lot of thought to this in the meetings, and I know you were there,
I was there. I was part of the problem.
A successful project. And we may learn from this about what we want to put in that roadmap. There may be some pitfalls we haven't anticipated that really should be part of that plan of operation or the action plan.
Well, okay.
I got one recommendation for you, based on what Joe was saying. As chair of the housing committee, and knowing now what you know, you may want to agenda your prior vote to rescind it until it was appropriate to consider the matter legitimately, because you wouldn't have known that there wasn't a real application. So it's certainly not pointing a finger at anybody, but I would suggest it might be a good idea for you to revisit that.
Well, now you switch things on me, but you're quite right. I mean, when the comment came out that at a December 2019 meeting, there was a project approved for 10 houses on that piece of land that Mr. Wise owns. I mean, that was a bomb that dropped on us. And there were people in the room that should have whispered in my ear that say, Art, there's already a project out there. And I'm not going to name who was in the room and who should have done that. But So I was, right, I was left out there hanging, and the rest of my committee was left out there hanging. But I don't want to, say, okay, now I'm going to change my mind or all this other stuff until I hear all the facts and go through the process as Mr. Powers points out, and it's got to be. So when we get into the process, I'll make a determination. You probably can know which way it's going to go. I'm not very happy with what happened. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks. And I just want to be clear, nobody's pointing finger, Art. I mean, the fact that only some people knew some things and other people knew other things, we're working on that to try to rectify that beyond your committee so that this doesn't happen again and wind up picking different boards. So all I'm suggesting, we know what happened, we can fix it, and then we can move forward to make sure that it doesn't happen again. All right, in any event, we do need a motion, and it probably needs both of those things in there. Belinda, you understand that the balance of the ask is for us to buy down projects and to facilitate their building. The 50 is for the housing coordinator?
Yeah, so originally the request was for 30,000 and it increased to 50,000. And I just want to clarify, the 50,000 is to anticipate increased work hours to engage in educational outreach, such as community forums, administer a trust Facebook social media page, and create marketing materials and engage in the action planning process.
All right, that should be in that, though. That's what Joe's saying, is we can amend things, but to the maximum extent possible, if we can identify stuff, it should be there, and it shouldn't just refer back to past actions. It should be, this is what we're going to be asking for doing this.
Yes. Yeah, it is on the CPC application.
Yeah, I know, but I didn't read it that way. It really needs to be very specific. Just what you said, in the language you said it, would be very helpful.
Yes, I believe that is on the application, just the way I read it.
Okay. Joe, have you read the application? Has everybody read the application, by the way?
No.
Well, we're faced with an October 30th deadline, guys. So we got to take an action unless you want to hold a special Zoom meeting next week to do this as a special one-off item. Joe?
So, Mr. Chairman, I have read it, and I'm going to try a screen share because my only question earlier was about the project title. So hopefully you can see it there. So we talk about the part-time housing coordinator in the title, but we don't get to any other activities.
That's what I was trying to bring up, is that I know it's in your head, Belinda, but these guys don't know how we operate. They get tons of these applications in, and it has to be tied towards not just the title, but specific actions that might occur, and break them down a little bit more. I'm not saying that what you said is wrong. I'm saying there's not enough there for it. Because, I mean, I've spoken to their chair, and I've spoken to some of their members through the past year. They're not going to consider our requests unless they could get a better handle on how we're expending the money specifically. And that's why I changed the report that went to them this year. They were real interested in knowing that, not so much the general broad stroke of, yeah, what we want to do is community engagement, what we want to do is this. It's more a laundry list of stuff. Like, we want to put out a contract for a housing coordinator, and that would price out at, because they're going to ask these things. There's nothing wrong with what you got there, but I think they're looking for more, and they have been, pushing me for more. So we can either do this now, or we can hold, a 20-minute one-off meeting next week, which Scott doesn't necessarily have to be involved with.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I can to perhaps expedite, I'd like to make a motion that the trust consider changing the title of the community preservation application to read expand on housing production plan / part-time housing coordinator for discussion purposes.
Okay. And also put in language about you know, the capability of buying down projects to achieve results that we want?
Well, the intent is to have the, if I think of the project title as to what's going to build the warrant article,
Right.
I know there needs to be some brevity, so that's why I thought if we tie the title of the application to both the housing production plan and the housing coordinator, we could then have Belinda and others work on the body of the application. But I think to try and give some notice, that's why I made the motion that I did, that we have housing production plan, expand housing production plan / part-time housing coordinator as the title.
Can
Or
I ask,
any direction there.
one word? Can I ask that we add one word, expand housing production plan outcomes?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I would argue if there's a second, we can do anything you want us to do.
Seconded.
With what language?
With the
Well, then we can
amended,
do amendments within the motion.
Okay, so to
I
expand,
already apologized in advance for being a parliamentary procedure honk. I won't do it again.
yeah, the bad news for everybody on this committee is I am too, so we're gonna wind up going into the very tall weeds. In any event, the change would be to explore and expand housing production plan opportunities, and then / part-time housing coordinator.
So moved.
seconded.
And Belinda, you got that?
Yes, I did.
The title's going to be really important, so that it is what we just moved. Is there any discussion about it? So we are approving by motion the plan with that amended change. Is that, I mean, Joe, that was your full motion, right? To approve the plan with that change.
That we amend the CPA application title to incorporate the language.
And approve it for the chair's signature with that change.
Understood.
Okay,
And
well,
I seconded that, Mr. Chairman.
just want the motion to read that way in the minutes. So, all right, any discussion? Where did Brendan go?
He's hanging around somewhere. There you go.
Moving around on the screen.
I'm here.
Change up the order here, Brendan.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, yeah, how about an aye or a nay?
I'll give an aye.
Judith?
I,
Larry?
Aye.
And Joe?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so that's 5-0. Thank you, guys. That's probably the most important thing we've been doing for a while here. Sisson Road Housing Development. I know it says discuss possible vote on engineering studies, but Joe has some feelings on that, and I already expressed them at the top of the meeting. We have to coordinate what we're doing. Just because somebody's the contract point person, their hours are still accountable to the town administrator. So, and I've mentioned this a number of times, that there's a queue for activities, and the Board of Selectmen actually is part of that queue. When Joe took over, there was like a stash of backlogged RFPs. So we're competing with the town to get back to current. Within context, we're not the first priority, and we got to figure out how to make it a higher priority, but that's not something that you can do by dealing directly. So Joe, Belinda, can you get together at some point? Joe?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I want to put out there that it was through no fault of Belinda in any way, shape, or form. She has been in contact with our town engineer. And Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, I'd like to share on the screen the document I sent you yesterday. The town engineer was on the call earlier, however, he has a
Brendan, we're fading back again.
I'm sorry?
Brendan's fading back again. Thank you.
So if you'll allow it, I'd like to do a screenshot of an update that the engineer provided me that I shared with you, Mr. Chairman, that was too late to get into the packet.
Okay, but with the understanding that it's nothing we can act on because it was too late to get in the packet.
Right. No, my understanding is that this was is an update as it related to the proposed engineering studies.
Yep.
Which we're not prepared to go forward on.
Okay. But yeah, sure. Share the screenshot there.
So hopefully you can see it there. And again, Belinda had reached out to the engineer, and I had worked with the engineer to follow up on this. I know that Laura Schufel from Mass Housing Partnership had indicated that I believe the prior town engineer had either conducted or caused to be conducted soil tests, and they're unable to locate those results, and the town is unable to locate those results. So I asked the town engineer to review the Sisson Road proposed development with an eye towards the Mass Housing Toolbox, which you can see they referenced in his notes. And he's identified what he believes would be some required next steps. So you can see there under site survey, he's indicating that for the Mass Housing Partnership Toolbox, the municipality is responsible for, of course, my screen is cut off, so I can't read the whole thing. Hopefully you can still see that. Can you still see it?
Half of it.
Yeah, the municipality is responsible for the development of a site survey. Site survey is required to include the comprehensive inspection and field survey, historical assessment of the property. And so you'll see the notes from our engineer that the site plan dated July 21st, 2008 is a field survey of the site. However, it's not clear what the land surveyor developed the plan, as it is not a stamped or signed plan. The engineer indicates that the site survey would likely have to be updated given that it's more than 12 years old. Going on as it relates to the developer is responsible for the examination of potential soil contamination, groundwater quality, surface water quality, and issues related. You can see the question from the engineers, has this work been complete? Because again, at present, the town has no information that it has been. And so, Mr. Chairman, with your agreement, I'll share this with the trust and with and Belinda and everyone else. And Griffin and I can follow up with Belinda and Laura and go figure out next steps if that's agreeable.
Yeah, I mean, so Belinda, that's going to be the game plan. But this is more than what Laura had said anyway. So given our first discussion, I'd like to make sure that we've covered all of our bases, because this is the thing that we really want to pursue.
Yeah.
And one other thing, Joe, and it does relate to contracting, so that we don't wind up with Belinda and Jay Coburn getting antsy over this. It is our intention to do an RFP, and I think Griffin said it wasn't. That's not as intense as this, to get the housing coordinator renewed. Right now, I'm operating on monthly purchase orders, and I would feel much more comfortable if we could find ourselves in an RFP situation and legitimize how we're operating.
Understood. So if it's the will of you and the trust to go forward, we can have an offline discussion with Belinda and all parties to get all that going.
Okay. So Belinda, I did mention it, so that you know, we're not just leaving you hanging there. And I have had discussions about this, but I want to make sure the public understands that. Okay, now, so there is nothing, I want to stress, because of the environment we're in, there is nothing to discuss in community engagement relative to Sisson Road, because we haven't got all our ducks in order about what it is we're doing, except for the draft RFP that Laura brought to us. Input about what it might look like, what bonus points we want to do, would come when we finally get everything backed up. And it is absolutely our intention, and the Harwich Theater, for lack of what it is called right now, but wanted to be, their president of their board wanted to be involved. And frankly, I encourage that, because they lease a building from the town on that property that's going to be co-located with whatever we do. And I want to make sure that the neighbors know that it is our intention that we get input from them. It's not just going to all of a sudden happen. But it's premature to get that input right now. Anybody have any other comment on that? Because I'm going to move away from the discussion of Sisson Road. We absolutely want to do Sisson Road. but we want to do it right. The community's going to be involved in it, and we're going to make sure that all of those processes that Joe outlined are in place too, so that we can get this thing rolling. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Mark.
Yeah, can I make a comment on your last statement there? You reached out and you've heard from the two abutters, one to the right and one to the left, and both responded positively. But the abutters behind the Sisson Road project, has anyone reached out to the condominiums behind?
Not to my knowledge, and I would really like to do that in a more formal way. So I'd like to be able to.
Without saying what is totally on my mind, I think you should.
All right, we'll take it.
Let me say, I believe this is going to be a tough crowd behind there. And I'll leave it at that.
Well, it may be, but I'm trying to balance. Anybody who knows me knows that for the last 20 years, I've been trying to balance affordable housing and open space. So it's like, there is a way to do this so that everybody's happy, but we need to be able to put a roof over people's heads too. So
I hear you, but I don't know if the people behind this project are really aware of this project. Let's put it that way.
That's why we want to kick money in too. A, it needs to look right, and B, we've discussed that there's no developer who would find it financially capable of developing the property the way we want to. We want to do 100% affordability with a mixture of 60% median income and 80% median income, because most of the things out there only deal with 80% median, and we're rapidly pricing ourselves out of any kind of workforce housing. So in order for us to influence that response so that it is 100%, not just 75, 25, and that we do cover 60% of median income affordability and 80%, we need to kick in some money. So I understand the concerns, but this is going to look like anywhere USA when we get done. I mean, that's my objective, and I'm pretty sure it's all the members on the trust share that objective. We want to put roofs over people's heads, but we don't want to do it in such a way that it looks like an invasion to the neighborhood.
Well, someone should reach out to the people behind there, and I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, point taken.
Thank you.
Thank you, Art. Okay, Housing Coordinator report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have the July, August, September monthly report attached. If you have any questions about that, let me know. And I also just wanted to point out that applications are available for 6 affordable homes for purchase for Habitat for Humanity. And there is a workshop, applicant information workshop that's happening this Saturday, October 24th at 10 a.m. And so if you know anybody interested, for the folks listening, if you know anyone that's interested, I highly encourage attending this applicant information workshop. Again, it's Saturday, October 24th at 10 a.m., where they will be talking about income eligibility and qualifications for a Habitat home ownership.
I want to amplify a little bit on that because you know this and I know this, but I'm not sure the public knows this. Well, first of all, where is the project? It's the West Harwich one, isn't it? That they're having a workshop over?
It's on Murray Lane.
Yeah,
it's 93 to 97 Main Street in Harwich.
And 93, 97 Main Street is typically referred to as Route 28. So Murray Lane is at that address on Route 28 behind it. That's the first thought. The second thought is, under Mass General Law, eligible applicants can come from anywhere in the Commonwealth. But I want to encourage people who live in Harwich that might feel that they have a need for the housing to attend this seminar, because the only way for them to get considered is by going through the Habitat process. Otherwise, anybody in the Commonwealth can apply for this thing.
Where is the actual meeting taking place?
It's via Zoom. It's a virtual session.
Can we put that on our site maybe tomorrow, so that there's a link to their Zoom invitation?
I have the flyer and application. So who would I give it to? Should I give it to Scott to post?
Can Danielle put that up, or does it have to be somebody in Anita's office, Joe?
No, actually, I think the quickest way to get it to the website is either Jamie or Caleb.
And just tell them I want it somewhere on the Affordable Housing Trust site so that there's a link directly to the Zoom link.
Sure thing.
Okay, and then the public has now heard this. It'll be on our site. Please go in there, and should you be interested in this, click on that link and you'll be part of the meeting. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That covers my update.
Okay. So, and we will be talking about the housing coordinator contract. So just rest assured you're not out there alone. Member reports, agenda building. Judith, you want to start us off? You managed to hold that pose for a very long time, Judith.
Judith,
And you are what most people hope that I would be. You're muted.
She's going.
I think she's frozen. Well,
Yeah.
we'll come back to Judith. Is Brendan still around?
I'm still here. I was on mute for a bit there.
Okay. You have anything you would want on the agenda, or you want to report anything?
No, all good on my end. I did miss the first 7 minutes of the meeting. My apologies. I just could not sign in for some reason. So I'll be sure to watch that later on today or tomorrow when I can watch it. But for right now, I'm all set.
Yeah, it might go pretty quick for you. We waited about 7 minutes, and then I had to read.
Yeah, no, I figured you did. I just was struggling to get on for some reason. Then there was another meeting that was talking over me for some reason. So I was logged into 2, but I only signed into 1, so I didn't know what was going on. So my apologies, but I'll be sure to pick up the extra 2 minutes later.
Yeah, we tried as hard as we could to finish the meeting before you got there, but it wasn't possible.
Right, exactly.
Joe?
Just that I had shared that engineer's report with both Belinda and then the trust in general, and Belinda, you and I and Griff can get together and follow up on that. And then, Mr. Chairman, very quickly, I wanted to just say to Art, I hope there was nothing that I said that would make you think that the work of the Housing Committee was in any way deficient for what you folks did in September. I always want to make it clear that groups such as yours and this group assist the town, and I would never knowingly want to say anything negative about them because you do God's work. So I want to leave today with you knowing that I hope you know that the Housing Committee's work has been exceptional and continues to be, and there is no reference to what your board did a month ago as being anything other than you didn't have all the information.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw in mine, Art, is that you only know what you know. I mean, you acted on what you knew.
Mr. Powers, I want to thank you very much, but just to leave you a little comment, I work in construction for Habitat, and then we always say amongst ourselves, the only thing you can say to a volunteer is thank you. You can't fire them.
Amen. Amen.
Well said, Art. Okay, is Judith back on?
I am. Can you hear
We're
me?
at the portion. Yeah,
Yeah, okay,
great.
good.
We started with you first, but you were frozen. We're at the month member reports about anything you want to report, and then the agenda building, anything you want to see on the agenda.
Nothing to report. I don't know if it should be an agenda item, but it'd be good to kind of go back and review potential buildable land in Harwich.
Yeah, I would like to have that discussion now that Joe is here. I want to make it clear that the town administrator is an ex officio member and has been all along. Joe was up to his earlobes in the elusive annual town meeting, which just kept moving around. So he was not capable of attending, but that doesn't mean he had any disinterest in this. And now that he's here, I think he'd be a valuable asset to us to have that kind of discussion.
Thanks.
So, okay, yeah, I think that should be a discussion point, Belinda, on that. And as should, I'm not sure when we have enough room on the agenda, but I would suggest sooner rather than later, we have the discussion about the 40B process so that we could, if I don't know if you have available to you the PowerPoint, because this is a fairly standard thing, but it goes here, it goes here, it goes here. You need the MHP. If you want it to be a friendly, it has to go in front of the Board of Selectmen to get a local initiative plan. I mean, there are things we fling around. I mean, we call them lips. We use abbreviations. And by the way, I just did it. It's Mass Housing Partnership. And it's very daunting. If we do that kind of presentation on the agenda, I have to warn you that the open meeting law has been very specific over the last couple of years now. You can't use initials. So we'd have to spell it out at least initially on the agenda. You can, in the subordinate discussions, you could abbreviate it, but we're not allowed to use BOS or HC for housing committee. So it would have to be spelled out. But just mentioning that, because more and more that's going to become an issue. Larry.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, and I guess in follow-up to Joe, doing God's work, I suspect that Mr. Bowden would remember that every meeting that you work on to build houses, you always have a snack and a discussion or a grace or a prayer, whichever it was.
Yeah, all of the above.
We can't do a prayer before this meeting, but it's in our mind. Thank you. One of the things that I've been looking at is that we had some discussions a while back about attorneys that were doing work for the town, and we're having a hard time getting answers on questions that we had concerning land. And just to follow up on that a little bit, you know, I just thought maybe we should look for somebody that is qualified to do land reviews and understand what we're doing rather than the specific work that the town attorneys do. As a result, I've been looking around. I've got a couple of firms that are in the process of sending me their qualifications. And once we get the qualifications, I would like to put that on the agenda to discuss that at probably at the next meeting. I suspect we'll have that. So we can get some quick answers. We can afford to pay for it, and it's relatively minimal. And we're looking at a good attorney that we could get good information from quickly, as opposed to waiting in a long queue.
Okay, we have had some discussions without Joe around about the RKP lawyer, but I don't want to go any further than this on this agenda item because it's not geared towards that. So agenda legal representation as a discussion point.
Correct. And to follow up on Judith, you know, I have been looking at some of the pieces of land myself. They're individual. I have not brought them to the committee, but we're looking forward to the next project so that we'll have more than one piece of paper in the queue and a couple of shovels, perhaps, Mr. Bowden.
Okay, anybody have anything else?
Yeah, I got one more comment here, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Feel free.
Okay, in reference to what Mr. Brophy just said, listening in right now, we have the chair of the Real Estate Open Space Committee. And there is a very accomplished committee that does a lot of preliminary good work when it comes to land. And, you know, reach out to them and see what they're looking at, or maybe review what they've looked at in the past and so on and so forth, the whole myriad of things. You know, I mean, they don't do the hard studies or the engineering studies and stuff like that. They farm that out, of course, but they're really the preliminary people, you know, that look at stuff. So
I don't mean to cut you off. We're moving late here.
Okay.
I will say to Elaine that I'm not sure who they're calling, but they're not calling me.
I don't know. They're after me.
Okay. Maybe you should. All right.
engaging.
I'm well aware of the Real Estate and Open Space Committee. I'm actually selectman's liaison to it. Lane does a terrific job, and we are in contact. And if we get this on the agenda, then I'm going to formally invite Elaine into that discussion because it'd be very helpful.
Good.
Okay. Anything anybody else wants to say? Okay, appreciate
It might be worth can you hear me okay? Yeah. Let's just say maybe it might be worth a call to the Cape Cod Commission awarded hack and
Yeah, Chatham.
to the Association to Preserve Cape Cod, $150,000. I want to say in like January or February, it was before the pandemic, but it was specifically to support towns in their environmental review of land for affordable housing. And maybe that's something that we can tap into if we do identify lands. Just thought.
Actually, that's not a bad thought. Belinda, maybe in between the meeting, you can try to run down what the commission actually awarded, so we have some something to put in the packet about how they did, what the requirements are.
Okay.
Right. Anything else? Really appreciate everybody's participation, and the next meeting. We don't have to do next week. So when do we want to do it? It's extremely helpful to Joe, if it's okay with everybody else, to use the 1 o'clock slot instead of the 2 because of his workflow.
That's fine by me.
Okay, so what date would you want that to be? Understanding that this was a week after what we had originally said that we were going to do.
How about the Thursday before Thanksgiving?
I'm very happy you didn't say Thanksgiving.
Nobody's going to be going to it.
That's true.
That would be the 19th. That would be the 19th. Is that okay with you, Joe?
Absolutely.
Larry?
And thank you for your forbearance.
Larry?
Fine by me. Aye.
Judith?
Yep, that works.
Okay, so that's our target date at 1 o'clock. Again, I thank everybody, and we are adjourned. I'll take a motion for adjournment, but
I'll move, Mr. Chairman.
Second that.
okay, it's non-debatable.